Some smells do not leave you. They embed themselves in the part of the brain that was built before language existed, before words, before thought. Mine comes back with diesel smoke and frost. The particular cold of a Minnesota morning in late November, when the ground has already given up and surrendered to ice and the sky is the color of old pewter. I smell it and I am 31 years old again, standing in a clearing I was never supposed to enter, looking at something I was never supposed to see. My name is Ray Cutler. I spent 29 years as a wildlife officer with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. I retired at the age of 60, with a bad hip, a commendation I keep in a drawer, and a silence I have maintained for the better part of 3 decades. I am breaking it, now because I am 68 years old and the silence has started to cost more than the truth. I know, in the fall of 1987, a bow hunter named Gerald Polk went into the Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness and did not come back. He was 44 years old. Experienced outdoorsman, licensed guide, had hunted that territory for 20 years. His truck was found at the access point in County Road 12. His bow was recovered half a mile in. His orange vest was found another quarter mile beyond that, hanging from a branch at eye level. Not fallen, not torn off, placed. He was never found. I was part of the search team. 6 days in the field. On the 4th day, I found something that I wrote out of my report. Something I buried under language about difficult terrain and weather complications and inconclusive evidence. My supervisor at the time, a man named District Chief Harlan Bowl, a political appointee who understood budgets better than wilderness, called me the evening before my report was due. He said one sentence. "The Wilderness Tourism Board meets in 11 days, Ray. Write me something I can work with." I wrote him something he could work with. Gerald Polk's file was closed 6 months later. Presumed drowning. I have carried the weight of that leaf for 31 years, and now it was back. I had 4 days left before my retirement became official. I was sitting in my DNR field office, a room that smelled of old coffee and topo maps and the particular exhaustion of a career spent in service to something that didn't always deserve it, when my phone rang. It was Deputy Sheriff Anya Marsh, years old, sharp, the kind of officer who still believed the job meant something. She told Emmy a geological survey team had gone into the Boundary Waters on a permit 4 days ago. 3 people, a senior geologist, his assistant, and a field technician. They were supposed to check in daily via satellite messenger. They had missed 3 consecutive check-ins. Emergency contacts had been notified. The permit listed their primary survey zone as Grid Sector 14 North. I knew that sector. I had known it since 1987. I had stayed out of it since 1987. Anya wanted to mobilize a volunteer search party. I told her not to. She asked why. I told her the weather window was closing, which was true, and that untrained volunteers in that terrain in those conditions was a liability, which was also true. I did not tell her the real reason. She asked what I suggested instead. I listened to myself say the words before I had consciously decided them. I'll go in. I know that ground. I know what to look for. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You have 4 days until you're a civilian, Ray." 3, I said. "I'll be out in 3. I drove home. Stood in my kitchen for a long time looking at nothing. My wife Helen had been gone 7 years. Pancreatic cancer. 8 weeks from diagnosis to end. I had a photograph of her on the shelf above the fireplace. She was laughing at something I had said. I couldn't remember what. On a lake somewhere in the summer of 1994. before everything got complicated. I looked at her photograph. I thought about Gerald Polk. I thought about the thing I had found on the 4th day of that search and written out of my report. Then I went to the gun safe. I am not a man who carries more than he needs. But for this, I made exceptions. My primary rifle, a Marlin 1895 chambered in 45-70 government, the same cartridge that stopped buffalo in the open plains 150 years ago. I had used it for bear country. I hoped it would be enough for whatever county road 12 still had waiting for me. Into the pack. A trauma kit. High-intensity flares. Thermal layers. 50 cord. 2 liters of water. 4 days of compressed rations. And in a side pocket, 2 custom spray canisters I had built myself over the course of a career spent in country where the standard options were insufficient. Concentrated oleoresin capsicum, the active compound in pepper spray, mixed with a suspension of aerosolized CS agent, the kind of thing that would drop a 600-pound black bear and buy you the seconds you needed to think. I loaded the truck, drove north. The access road off County 12 hadn't changed. Same gravel, same pullout, same 3 white pines at the entry point that leaned together, at the top like they were whispering. The survey team's vehicle was there, a white Jeep Gladiator with the Geological Survey Company logo on the door. Both front doors open, interior light running on fumes. On the dashboard, a satellite messenger unit, the device that should have been sending daily check-ins. It had been set face down on the dash, not forgotten. Set down, like someone had turned it over so they wouldn't have to look at it. I stood at the tree line for a moment before entering. The forest was silent, not the comfortable silence of early morning before the birds wake. The other silence, the one that means the birds already left. I knew the boundary waters, the way a man knows a place he has spent a working lifetime inside. The cedar swamps in the southeast quadrant, the portage routes between the chain lakes, the rocky outcroppings and the northern ridges where the pines thinned and the granite broke through the surface like old bones. The Sector 14 North was different. It always had been. The old Ojibwe name for that part of the wilderness translated roughly as the place that breathes wrong. I had always appreciated the precision of that description. The first sign appeared within 400 meters, high on a birch trunk, maybe 15 feet up. A section of bark had been removed. Not stripped, not clawed, peeled, cleanly, deliberately, in a shape that was not random, 3 vertical lines and an arc above them. I had seen a mark like that once before, in 1987. I kept moving. The cold deepened as I went north. Not weather cold. The other kind, the kind that comes from somewhere below the temperature. My hip throbbed with that specific ache it reserved for moments when my body knew something my mind hadn't admitted yet. I had stopped counting how often the hip had been right. Aitawanda. I found their camp in a narrow clearing pressed between 2 ridgelines. From 50 meters out, it looked intact. Up close, the details told a different story. 2 expedition tents stood without damage. The door zippers and both had been opened from the outside, not unzipped quickly, not torn. Drawn open, along the track with something that understood how a zipper worked. Inside the larger tent, sleeping bags laid flat. Personal gear organized. A field journal face down on a sleeping bag with a page marked. I opened it. The last entry, 3 days ago, read as follows. Movement on the north perimeter, again tonight. 3rd consecutive night. Always the same direction. Always just beyond flashlight range. Dale says coyotes. I don't think it's coyotes. The sounds are wrong. The spacing is wrong. We're going to pull out tomorrow, early. They hadn't pulled out early. The food storage told me more than the journal did. Bare canisters, the hard-shell containers that require a specific twisting motion to open, a motion no wild animal has ever been documented performing, had been opened. The lids were set aside. Not forced, not cracked. Placed. The contents had been removed and sorted. Protein items. Eaten everything else, arranged in a line in the ground outside the tent. Methodical. Selective. Intelligent. The tracks began at the camp's edge and moved northeast. 3 sets of boot prints. 2 heavy, 1 lighter. Running. The toe dig was deep. The stride was long. They had been running with everything they had, and beside those prints, another trail. I crouched down despite what it cost my hip. The impressions were digitigrade, weight on the toes like a large cater a dog, but the size was wrong. I placed my hand beside one print. It was nearly twice the width of my spread fingers, and the stride length, I paced it out. 2 meters between prints. Whatever made this was moving upright, at a speed that no animal I had ever encountered could sustain on 2 legs. 30 meters from the camp, snagged on a cedar branch, a small GPS unit. Cracked casing, battery near dead. I pressed play on the voice recorder function. Wind. Hard breathing. The specific rhythm of people running and trying not to make noise while doing it. Then a man's voice. Low. Controlled. The voice of someone who had decided that panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. Dale, listen to me. Don't answer them. Whatever it sounds like, don't answer. A woman's voice. Closer to the mic. Almost steady. How many? The man again. I count at least 4. Maybe more. They're using the ridge to stay above us. A sound beneath the wind. Not a growl, not a howl. Something between. A modulated vocalization with structure and variation. The sound of something communicating. Then, a second voice answered it, from the opposite direction. And a third. The man's voice, one final time. Barely above a breath. My God, they're coordinating. They're actually coordinating. Then the recording ended. I kept the GPS unit. I kept moving. The forest around me had been quiet since I entered. Now it was something else attentive. The difference between an empty room and a room where something is sitting very still in the corner. The nausea hit me without warning, 40 minutes past the camp, a wave of vertigo so sudden and complete. I put one hand against a pine trunk to stay upright. The world tipped, not visually, physically. A vibration in the center of my chest, behind my sternum. Like a very low note played on an instrument I couldn't hear but could feel in every bone. Infrasound, I had read about it in a paper published by a wildlife biologist in British Columbia 15 years ago. She had documented evidence of large predators, specifically tigers, using subaudible frequencies to disorient prey before a strike. The frequency causes nausea, disorientation, sometimes a sense of unreasoning dread. This was not random. This was directed. They knew where I was. They were preparing me. I found ginger in a survival pouch in my pack. An old trick from an Anishinaabe trapper had known in my first years in the field. The sharp heat cut through the nausea. I tightened my grip on the marlin and kept moving, but I changed direction. If they were steering me, I would move perpendicular to their intended route. Free. I found the geologist at the edge of a frozen bog. His name, according to the permit, was Victor Ashby, 7 years old, 23 years of fieldwork in remote terrain. He had not been torn apart. He had not been eaten. He had been driven into the frozen mud up to his waist at the bog's edge. His arms had been pinned behind him using his own equipment straps. He was positioned facing outward, facing the bog, eyes open and already frozen. Like an audience member arranged to watch a performance. This was not predation. I had spent 29 years in wilderness managing the line between human activity and wild animal behavior. I knew what predation looked like. This was not hunger. This was something else. Something that had a concept of arrangement, of display, of demonstration. The cold in my chest had nothing to do with the temperature. Then I found the structure. 20 feet from Victor's body, built at the base of a dead cedar, an arrangement of animal bones, precisely placed. I crouched and looked without touching. Long bones stood upright in the frozen ground. Smaller bones laid flat between them. Lines that curved. Points that intersected. I pulled out my map and compass. My hands were very still as I made the comparison. The ridgelines matched the long bones. The bog was represented by a flat shoulder blade. The frozen lake to the northwest was a curved rib, and at the highest point of the arrangement, an exposed granite ridge called Harlan's Crown, a single dark clawed tip had been pressed into the earth. They had built a map of this forest, of this terrain, and they had marked where the game would end. That is the moment I understood what I was dealing with. Not an animal, not a predator operating on instinct, something that planned, something that conceptualized terrain and represented it in physical form, something that thought. I heard here an hour later. A woman's voice. Somewhere in the trees to my north, broken, exhausted, in pain. Help me, please, I can't move my leg. Please, is anyone there? I stopped. My finger moved to the trigger guard. My heart moved toward the sound. One part of me, the part that had spent 3 decades protecting people in wild places, lurched forward. The other part, the part that had been listening to the GPS recording, went very still. I stood motionless for 30 seconds, and then I heard it. Help me, please. I can't move my leg. Please, is anyone there? The exact same words, the exact same pause between leg and please. Identical intonation, identical exhaustion. Identical break in the voice at the word anyone, not similar. The same, a recording. I raised the marlin and shouted, Sandra Voss, if you're out there, make a sound that isn't those words. Silence. And then, from my left, Sandra Voss. If you're out there, make a sound that isn't those words. My own voice, my own cadence, my own accent, my own specific worn-down exhaustion. Returned to me from a direction where nothing human should have been standing. The forest came alive around me. Not with movement, I could see, with sound. Voices, the geologist's voice from the recording, the woman's cry, a man shouting something that cut off before it resolved into words. And beneath all of it, my voice, playing back fragments of what I had said in the last hour, directions I had muttered to myself, my cursing when my hip seized on a root, a single quiet word I had said to no one when I found Victor. God, coming back to me from 5 directions simultaneously. They had been close enough to hear me the entire time. I changed tactics. I made noise, deliberate, directional noise, moving through a dense stand of spruce for 20 meters. Then I stopped, killed my flashlight, pressed my back against the widest trunk I could find, and waited. 40 seconds. Then, it stepped into the pale light reflected off the snow clouds, nearly 8 feet tall while hunched. The head was long, more canine than human, with ears that tracked independently like a predator's, but the shoulders were wrong for a wolf. Too broad, too powerful, the musculature of something built to pull as well as run. It walked upright. The legs were digitigrade, bent at an angle that gave it a coiled, spring-loaded quality, like every step was the beginning of a leap. The arms hung past the knee. The hands. I looked at the hands. They were the worst part. Not because of the claws, though the claws were black and long enough to be instruments, because of the way it held them, not hanging like an animal's forelimbs, held, at the sides, slightly forward, ready, the way a person stands at the edge of a decision. It stopped at the place I had made noise, lowered its head, sniffed the broken branches. Then it straightened, and turned until it was facing directly toward my tree. It could not see me. I was certain of it. The darkness between us was complete. But it stood there, perfectly still, for 15 seconds. Then it made a sound, a dry, precise click of tongue against palate. 3 beats, a signal from the dark, 3 answering clicks from 3 different directions. I had one route that wasn't closed. I took it, moving south and east, away from the coordinating clicks, toward the elevated ground of Harlan's Crown, the place marked on the bone map. I was going where they wanted me to go. I knew that. But the alternative was a closing circle and flat terrain, and I had been a wildlife officer long enough to know that on flat ground with no cover, the outcome was not a question. I know. They flanked me on the climb. Dark shapes at the edge of vision pacing me between the trees, sometimes upright, sometimes dropping to all fours, with a fluid ease that was wrong for anything that walked upright. They were not attacking, they were herding. I fired once, not at a target but at the darkness beside a shape that came within 10 meters. The marlin's report in the cold air was like a flat crack of thunder. The shape pulled back. They widened the circle, but they did not leave. I found Sandra Voss near the base of Harlan's Crown. She was alive, barely, hypothermic. A compound fracture of the lower left leg that she had splinted herself with a tent pole and duct tape from her pack. She had been there for 2 days. She had been conscious for most of it. I don't know how she had stayed conscious. The kind of will it takes to do that, I have no words for. She grabbed my arm when I crouched beside her. Her grip was still strong. "They come at night," she said. "They don't come into the granite, they stay at the tree line." I looked at the rock face around us. Solid granite, no soil, nothing to track in. "How many?" I asked. "I've counted 6 moving together. There might be more. The big one, it's different. It stays back. It watches. It's the one that decides." I got her to the highest point of the exposed granite, set up a minimal shelter using the thermal blankets and a rock overhang, started a heat pack against her core, assessed the leg. The splint was good. She had done a good job. The fracture needed a hospital, but it wasn't going to kill her tonight. Darkness came down fast. With it, the voices again. Below the granite shelf. At the tree line. A chorus this time. All of Sandra's recorded cries. Playing back in variation. Overlapping, echoing, shifting in direction. and underneath them, the infrasound. I felt it before Sandra said anything. "It's doing it again," she said, her voice flat. She had learned not to react to it. 3 days had been enough to teach her that. I took out the ginger, gave her a piece. She took it without questioning. Then I saw Helen. She was standing at the edge of the granite, 7 years dead, standing there in the blue coats he had worn on our last trip north together, her hair the way it had been before she got sick. She was looking at me with that expression, the one that had always meant come here. "Let me fix this, you don't have to do it alone," she opened her mouth. "Raymond," she said, "come down, they just want to show you something. Come down and see." I closed my eyes, pressed my back harder against the rock. "You're not real," I said. My voice was barely a voice. "You're not her. She's gone. She's been gone 7 years. When I opened my eyes, the coat, the hair, the expression, still there. Raymond. No." I raised the marlin, not at her, past her, into the dark below, and I fired at the base of the largest pine at the tree line. The blaster raised the silence. Helen vanished. Below, a sharp vocalization, high and cut off, then withdrawal, the sounds of movement pulling back into deeper forest. Sandra looked at me. "What did you see?" she asked. "Something that knew what to show me," I said. She nodded slowly. "It showed me my brother. First night. He's been gone 12 years. He was standing there telling Meth a leg didn't hurt, that I should come down." She pulled the thermal blanket tighter. I almost did. The siege lasted until 3 in the morning. Coordinated approaches, stone throwing, deliberate, accurate testing the shelter's angles, the resonant vocalization that made the granite hum beneath us. 3 separate attempts to approach from above the overhang. I repelled the first 2 with the spray canisters. The effect was instant and violent. Whatever got a face full of that compound dropped from the rock face and did not come back. The third approach, the alpha, came over the lip of the overhang silently. The only warning was Sandra's sharp intake of breath. I turned with the flare gun, the only weapon I could handle in that confined space, and fired upward into the overhang. The magnesium burst lit the space like a white sun for 2 seconds. I saw it clearly, for 2 full seconds. I wish I hadn't. And the scream it made when the flare found it. Sandra covered her ears. A burning shape fell from the overhang and did not stop screaming for a long time. And then it did stop. After that, silence, complete and immediate. As if someone had turned off a switch. Sandra and he sat in the shelter without speaking for a long time, listening to the silence get older. Dawn. The forest under snow, pale and clean and completely without sound. I got Sandra off the granite and moving on the makeshift crutch I had cut during the night. Slow, painful. 3 hours back to the access road. I felt them. In the tree line. Watching. Not following. The alpha was gone. The hierarchy had broken. They let us leave. Deputy Marsh was at the road with 2 emergency vehicles when we came out. She saw Sandra's leg. She saw my shoulder. She saw our faces. She said nothing for a moment. Just organized the paramedics. When they had Sandra on a stretcher, Marsh came to me. "What happened, Ray?" I looked at her. Young face. still believing the job meant what it was supposed to mean. I thought about the bone map, the GPS recording, the alpha pointing at my window with one black-clawed finger, Helen's voice coming out of the dark, Victor Ashby arranged at the bog's edge facing outward, the word scratched in the snow beside Dale's body that I haven't told you about yet. The word was stay. I thought about Harlan Bola telling me to write him something he could work with. I thought about Gerald Polk's file. Presumed drowning. I thought about how much the Wilderness Tourism Board was worth to this county in a given year. I thought about Sandra Voss, who had held herself together for 3 days in a compound fracture, and who deserved to have someone say out loud what was in those woods. And then I thought about what saying it out loud would actually achieve. Bears, I said. Marsh looked at me. A long look. The kind people give you when they know. They're being lied to, and they're deciding whether to push. She didn't push. She had learned something in her time in this county. I don't know when. I don't know how. But she had learned it. She nodded once, wrote something in her notebook, tore it out, and handed it to me. It was a grid reference, Sector 14 North, with a single line written beneath it in her hand. Third complaint this year, all hunters, all same area, all bears. I folded the paper, put it in my pocket. I retired 3 days later, drove south, unpacked boxes in a small house near a lake in Wisconsin, put Helen's photograph on the shelf, sat in a chair on the porch and looked at a body of water that had nothing wrong with it. For 3 days, I did not go near anything that resembled a forest. Done on the 4th day, I opened my laptop and I started writing this. I am not asking you to believe me. The surveying company listed Dale Ferris and Victor Ashby as missing, presumed dead. Environmental conditions. Sandra Voss gave a statement to the county. I have not read it. I hope she said what she wanted to say. I hope someone listened. What I know is this. In 1987, Gerald Polk went into Sector 14 North and didn't come back. In 2023, a survey team went into Sector 14 North. 2 of them didn't come back. The sector has been hunted for 60 years. People have been going in there for 60 years. The file on that sector at the DNR office in Duluth, I checked it before I retired, goes back to 1961. The earliest report, 3 loggers, same area, same outcome, filed as a machinery accident. On to whatever is in Sector 14 North, it was there before the loggers, before the settlers, before the surveys and the permits and the tourism boards and the wilderness designations. It was there when this land was called something else by people who understood it better than we do. People who had a name for what lived there, who built their villages at a respectful distance, who taught their children the difference between the forest you can enter and the forest that enters you. I sit on my porch in the evenings. The lake is quiet. The tree line in the far shore is dark after sunset. I tell myself it is only trees. Most evenings, I believe it. But some nights, when the wind shifts from the north, I feel it. That low vibration, not in my ears, in my chest. Behind my sternum, like a very large, very patient thing drawing one slow breath, reminding me it knows where I went, reminding me it knows where I am now. The hunt was not ended in those woods. It was only adjourned, and I'm not sure even here, even this far south, that the distance means what I need it to mean.